Deadpool and Wolverine is directed by Sean Levy and stars Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman as Deadpool and Wolverine. This time around, Deadpool must team up with the Wolverine in order to fight against the TVA and save Wade Wilson's home world. Now, if you've seen my reviews for Logan and the Deadpool films, you will know that I really enjoyed those films, especially the first Deadpool and Logan. I think they're some of the best comic book films out there, especially Logan. Like, that is like my favorite comic book film adaptation of a beloved character. And I was hesitant at first when they announced that Hugh Jackman was going to return as a Wolverine, because I thought Logan was such a perfect ending to the character. But I decided to give it a chance because this is a team up that we as comic book fans have been waiting for a long time. The team up with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool. They have kind of teamed up before in X-Men Origins Wolverine, but that was a poor portrayal of both of those characters, in my opinions, that were only held together by the good graces of their performances in that film. Since then, they worked on other projects in the X-Men universe and had worked with much better scripts, but we still been waiting for this team up, and we finally got it. And how does it turn out? I gotta say, this team up was worth the wait for me. Now, this is not a perfect film, so I'm gonna get my problems out of the way first. For one, Cassandra Nova as the main antagonist is poor. Like, she is a poor antagonist, and not one of the worst, but definitely not one of the good ones either. She is that forgettable MCU villain with that generic plot that she wants power, and she is not like threatening like the bad guy from Guardians of the Galaxy 3. She is nothing compelling like Thanos. Like, she doesn't have to be like top tier villain, but she could have been something, and she is nothing to me. Like, she is a terrible villain. I did not like the motivation of the character of Wade Wilson in the beginning and why he is in the state he is in now. I felt like that was a pretty poor motivation. I felt like it could have been explored a little bit further, but they do nothing with it. So yeah, I just felt like the motivation there could have been explored a bit more and could have had a little bit more depth. It felt way too safe, I guess, and it wasn't explored enough. The cinematography is good, but like with most MCU movies, it has a grayish drab to it at times that don't make it look that visually appealing. But other than that, everything else about the film really did work for me. For one, Deadpool and Wolverine here. Oh my god, I love this team up. This felt like this movie could have come out of the 80s or the 90s, like those old buddy cop movies of two people that banter with each other, argue with each other a lot, just fighting and then fighting the bad guys. Just, it felt like it was from that era, you know, the Beverly Hills Cop era, or the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles era, which is what Hugh Jackman or Ryan Reynolds, I believe, said that they took inspiration from that film. And you can really tell that with how they portrayed the characters here. It is very akin to that of a John Candy and Steve Martin type of role in that movie. And I think it worked out pretty well here. And I really loved the characterization of the Wolverine here and what they did with him. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I felt like it was an understandable way of bringing back Hugh Jackman into the role, and how they portrayed him as a more comic accurate type of Wolverine, I think worked out really well here. Not just with the costume design, but the way he acts the character out. With this being a multiverse film, there are going to be a lot of cameos as teased in the trailers. I think the cameos here, I'm not going to spoil what they are, but they were much better cameos than what we gotten in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and how they were handled here was much better than in that film. Because many of these cameos, I would say they are more supporting roles. They felt like they had a role in the story, pushing the story forward. It felt like necessary characters that Deadpool and Wolverine need to meet in order to move the plot along, and they added something to the movie, whether in dialogue or story or in the action sequences. They all tie together very well. They fit well with the themes of the film about trying to find a purpose and redemption for yourself, which I thought was pretty well explored here with the characters of Wolverine and Deadpool, and how they conflict with each other in the beginning of the film, and how it ties back up in a neat bow by the end of the film. I think it all worked very well. The visual effects also look pretty good again, finally. They don't look that cheap. There is a good amount of sets and practical effects used here, and I really like that. It helps the film have a sense of realism to it, and it doesn't make it look at all cheap. Though there's one set that I felt like it was too much of a set. It wasn't a terrible set design, but you could tell that they were in a set room for that scene. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but yeah, it just felt way too much like a set in my opinion. But everything else about the film, I thought visually looked pretty good despite the drab cinematography. I also liked the editing and directing too. I thought this was a very fast-paced film that did not drag. It was never boring. I felt a lot of the dialogue sequences and humor was all really well done. Shawn Levy does a really good job at helming the action sequences. I love a lot of the neat camera movements he does in the beginning, and with the action sequences between Deadpool and Wolverine fighting each other or fighting against different people. I think it was all helmed very well. Though definitely some are helmed better than others, but for the most part, the action sequences here are great. And as I said before, the humor is really good. I actually think the humor is probably the funniest out of all Deadpool films. Obviously, the story itself also, another negative I had to point out, is probably the weakest. Like, the negatives I said before are more like nitpicks. My biggest actual problem is the story. It just felt like it was too convoluted. Like, it was trying to be simple, but it added so much where it started to become convoluted. It messed up the timeline like every other X-Men film does. They always mess up the timelines, whether they're good or bad. So story-wise, I would say that the story and timeline is the least interesting, but I was able to follow it well enough, get emotionally invested enough with the story and with the characters of Wade Wilson and Deadpool, at least after that first act, to where I was entertained throughout the rest of the entire film and wanted to know what happens next. And man, the opening scene sets the tone perfectly for what you could expect throughout the entire film. All in all, Deadpool and Wolverine I thought was a really fun return to form for the MCU. A touching love letter to old previous Fox films, not just X-Men but Fox films in general. You'll understand why. I think it is a nice introduction to Deadpool in the MCU and what they're going to do with that character. I'm really excited for. I really had a blast with this film. I thought about it for quite a while. I watched the film a few days ago, but I wanted to let the hype die down and think about the movie critically and what are my thoughts on it. And I have to say, it is a really fun film. Not perfect, has its problems, but I would definitely recommend you guys go check this out. I'm gonna give Deadpool and Wolverine an A-. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time.